Welcome to the Greater Statesville Chamber of Commerce 2024 Candidate Podcast. I'm William Morgan. We have the opportunity to interview candidates for local, state, and federal office, and we're going to deal with the latter now. We have with us, pleased to be joined with Charles Eller, who is a candidate for U.S. House, the 10th District, filling the large shoes of Representative Patrick McHenry as he decides to enter private life. So welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about Charles Eller.
Well, I was born in Statesville, right here in the 10th District. Grew up here, went to school here, graduated high school here from Statesville Senior High in 1980. From there, went to NC State University for 2 years, and then transferred to UNC Chapel Hill, where I majored.
Let me stop you there.
Okay.
So your house divided among yourself?
Yeah, you see,
okay.
at the time, State didn't have a business school, and that's what I wanted to go to.
All right.
Graduated UNC Chapel Hill. From there, me and my brother Kyle, who you know, we went into business together and bought into an automotive franchise, and eventually we had 3 stores. We had one in Salisbury, one in Troutman, and then one in Charlotte. Owned and operated that for 25 years, sold that in 2012. Since then, I've been kind of semi-retired, doing some consulting and everything. But that's who I am, and I have a lifelong interest in politics, history, economics, and just feel a calling. This is my time to run for Congress, just because of the way the country's headed. And it's just like you, I can remember when it was a totally different country than it is now, and I want to go there to make a difference.
You know, and that's so important, because I think we're very polarized as a country, very divisive, all the way from the federal level down to even our local school board, for example. If you are elected, you're going to be sent up to Washington to not only represent the district here, the 10th District, but also to craft legislation for the entire country. So how do you balance that? Where are the priorities? You've got to deal with the folks back home. That should be priority number one. But at the same time, you have to focus on what's going on in Kansas.
Well, so my allegiances are going to be in this order. The first one is going to be to the Constitution that I would swear to uphold. And the second is to the voters here in the 10th District. That's who I represent. And growing up here, I know how people think. Because I talk to them every day. I kind of know their political sentiments and feelings and everything else. But you're right. It's about the shape and the direction of the country. And right now, the country is just on the wrong course. Economically, we're on the wrong course with the invasion and occupation on the southern border. Culturally, what's happened and the breakdown of the family, and just bringing up issues that we used to never even think about, But we have to make a course correction, or we're going to lose the country, William. It's just that simple. We're headed down that road right now. It's accelerating. It's intensifying, and as a Republican, I can sit here and I can blame Joe Biden and the progressive Democrats all day long. I can say that everything that's gone wrong in the country over the last 4 years, and maybe 50 years, all started by a progressive Democrat. But guess what? Rhino Republicans have been complicit in that, and that's why that even though Republicans have won more elections over the last 50 years, we've lost the country, because they go there to Congress one way, they campaign one way, and they say one thing, and once they get to Washington, D.C., they become a part of that establishment and that swamp, and their voting record does not match their rhetoric. And that's why we're going the wrong direction. When you look at economically, the national debt, the federal spending, just the inability to get anything done. And there's very few people that are willing to, one, not only identify the problem, that's the first thing, but to make the tough choices that needs to be done, because they're afraid to be labeled, to be called a name. They are afraid they may lose political contributions and donations, and they just don't want to have to deal with the media scrutiny and the ridicule. Me, I've never shied away from that. Yeah.
We, as we sit here now, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the House of Representatives has a 3-seat majority for Republicans.
That's correct.
The Senate has a 1 Democrat, 1 Independent. head.
That's correct.
So there's no doubting that we're polarized. But you and I are the same age, and we remember when Ronald Reagan had a beer with Tip O'Neill in the Rose Garden. Do you see a time when, and do you see it necessary to be able to work across the aisle to come to a compromise?
William, to be honest, I really don't know. I would like to say yeah. I would like to say yes. When you and I grew up, we had friends that, my dad was a Republican. I'm not sure what your parents were Republican, okay? But you and I had friends that were Democrats. We went to school with them. We talked with all the time. We played sports with them. Back then, there was more of a shared sense of values. And while we made the biggest disagreements then, and I can remember having these conversations when I was in high school, back then Republicans and Democrats would say, hey, if you're a Republican, I want to spend $200 billion this year on the defense budget. The Democrats would say, oh, I want to spend $175 billion. But you still recognize the threat of communism. You recognize the dangers, of the Soviet Union, communist China. But we were just more... we identified more with each other. We went to church. We believed in God. There wasn't this breakdown of the family, and some of the issues that are being talked about now just didn't occur. And people now, Democrats are getting their news from one media source, Republicans get their news from another media source, and we're on parallel universes. When you and I were growing up, there was Walter Cronkite, Frank Reynolds, Howard K. Smith, and it was a 30-minute news broadcast, and they called balls and strikes. And maybe at the end of that, maybe once a month, they had an editorial. So everybody was getting the same information. And there was just more civility in everything. Now, with what our kids are being taught, how they're being misled, with what they're not only learning, but what they're not learning, I just see such a divide, and I'm not really sure how to bridge that.
Let's fast forward to November.
Okay.
You wake up, and you're the newest Congress member from the 10th District. You go to Washington, put your hand on the Bible, and swear to take an oath in the Constitution. What are your top priorities? Where do you start?
Well, one of the first things I think we need to do, and the most imminent threat, is the southern border. I am in favor of closing down the border. I want to complete the border wall, but that's going to take time. In the meantime, what I think we need to do to stop this illegal invasion and occupation by over 10 million people that have come in the country just in the last 3 years is I want to see all federal aid that's currently going to illegals, I want to see that cut off. So we don't incentivize people to come here, but we don't incentivize them to stay here. No free health care, no free food stamps, no free education, no free housing. They have to go. I also want to see employers that hire these illegals. They need to pay a price. There needs to be fines if you're hiring somebody that's illegal because you're paying somebody under the table and it's affecting an American worker. Also, I want to see legislation introduced, and I would be glad to sponsor it or co-sponsor it. I do not think if you're here illegally that you should be counted when it comes to congressional representation. Only citizens should be counted for that. Then, lastly, I think we need to hold China accountable for bringing in the drugs, the fentanyl, and all the crime that's coming in with the illegal immigration. It's overwhelming our schools. It's overwhelming our hospitals. That's one thing. The second thing I want to do, William, is we've got to get this spending under control. It is just, as a small business owner and somebody that knows a little bit about economics and accounting, we can't keep spending money like this. We're $34 trillion in debt. It took the United States 193 years, from 1790 to 1983, to accumulate $1 trillion in cumulative debt. We are now going in debt, $1 trillion every 5 months. Every 5 months. So one of the first things that I'm going to do is I'm going to commit right now, I'm not going to vote to raise the national debt limit 1 penny. And people say, well, if you don't raise the national debt, How are you going to pay? How you going to pay the country's bills and not default? Well, that's easy. You go back to pre-COVID spending levels, which right now we're taking in $5 trillion. Our spending levels in 2019 were $5 trillion. So what I would do is I would pay. We're not going to default on the debt. You pay the interest on the bond. You pay the interest. You pay the face amount of those bonds, and you protect Social Security and Medicare. No cuts to those, but everything else, from Medicaid to the Defense Department, has got to be on the table. Mm-hmm. Everything has got to be on the table. So by doing that, you're not going to have the increase in spending. That's going to help control inflation that's crushing people right now. People on fixed incomes, or whether you're a young person and you can't afford a down payment on a house, much less a mortgage payment because of interest rates to combat inflation. Mm-hmm. But we're going to have to do that. For too long, members of Congress just kick the can down the road and pass continuing resolution after continuing resolution. And if I go there, I'm not going to do that. I'm committed not to doing that. But and then lastly, we need to do something about reining in these alphabet agencies and the weaponization of government, like the FBI and the DOJ, who, in my opinion, have been weaponized and turned against the American people, and they're doing things that are just completely unconstitutional and were never designed to do.
Okay. You have 4 challengers in the primary. Mm-hmm. Why should somebody vote for Charles Eller?
Well, for the same reason I voted Donald Trump in 2016. He wasn't a politician. I have no political allegiance really to any party or any special interest group or any lobbyist or any donor. I am who I am. And my reasons for running for Congress are rooted in something that I think is pure, which is to do something good for the country, to get the country back on track. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for the people of the 10th District. I'm not doing it for money, fortune, or fame. A lot of people who run for office, they've either hold currently political office, or they view this as just another rung on the ladder. Or some people who are running for office, it's just a way to pad their resume. And they're doing it to enrich themselves, and they're doing it for more selfish reasons. I'm doing it because I can remember a time, just like you can, when the country was much different, and it was a much stronger country all the way around. And I'm doing it because I remember that, and I want to help take America back to that. Mm-hmm. And I'm just the kind of person, I think, that has the backbone and the guts to not only say what needs to be said, but to actually do what needs to be done. That's what differentiates me from the other people I'm running against. I'm sure they're all fine people. I'm sure I could shake hands with them, have a beer with them. They're all good people. But I just don't think that anybody is going to have the passion and the dedication once they get to Washington to stand up and do what needs to be done for the people of the 10th District and the United States.
Well, this was not a decision you came to lightly. And we appreciate your willingness to serve. We appreciate you being here today. We wish you well in the primary.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles.